I was going to a haircut, a national chain here in America to get a haircut. They were running a special for $5.99 haircuts, as they so often do. I pull in, the wait time is too long. It's an hour and a half because it's a cheap haircut and there's a lot of people waiting. I need a haircut. I don't have an hour and a half to wait. So I drive to a local barber shop, and on the wall, it's very clearly stated it's $15 for a haircut. And I sit down and I'm talking with the guy as he's cutting my hair. And I said, hey, I want to ask you a question. I'm not negotiating my haircut price. And he said, that's good because it's on the wall. I'm like, yes, I understand. I'm paying the $15. But I just came from this other place that said they were going to give me a haircut for $5.99. So what's the difference between your $15 haircut and the $5.99 haircut? Because we've got a haircut and a price, right? Those are only two things. And the guy smiled and he just kind of looked at me and he goes, oh, that's simple. I fix $5.99 haircuts.
One thing I hear over and over again. I forgot my. Okay, let's start again.
There we go.
One thing I hear over and over again from business leaders is that B2B marketing feels boring, very credible, like it could belong to almost anyone. And the interesting thing is, it's not forgettable because the people, the businesses, or even the ideas are boring. It's because somewhere along the way, communication lost its humanity. As we move into an AI-shaped operating environment, this matters more than ever. When content becomes easier to produce and volume explodes, meaning becomes the real differentiator. My guest today is Bill Reynolds, founder of Element502. Bill is a seasoned marketing and branding professional who helps organizations find their authentic voice and communicate with clarity, purpose, and trust. What I really appreciate about Bill's thinking is that he doesn't treat marketing as noise making. He treats it as a leadership responsibility, which is exactly how I see marketing too. Today's conversation is about why B2B marketing so often feels boring, what's actually missing from the message, and how organizations can communicate in a way that feels human, intentional, and credible, especially in a world where AI can generate content faster than ever. So if you ever felt that your message should be landing better than it is, then this conversation is for you. Welcome, Bill.
Well, thanks, Susanna. Glad to be here.
Good to have you here. So, Bill, when I look at your LinkedIn profile, you describe yourself as a technology-driven leader with deep experience guiding organizations through digital transformation, leading technical teams, and translating complex technology into business strategy. And obviously, you and I both have lived through multiple waves of change already, from digitalization to automation and now into the AI era. When you look back at that journey, what have you learned about leading people through these shifts? And just as importantly, where do you think you personally got it right or wrong along the way?
That's a big question.
That's a strong start.
That's a strong start. I think the biggest thing is that you mentioned AI, and just as you were talking through, I mean, any time new technology shows up, it always creates some bit of fear and some other things. I mean, if you think about it, when we started bringing in assembly lines or the cotton gin or early industrial automation stuff, there were people who that used to be their job, but now their job was done by a machine because it was more predictable, more repeatable, and the product could be done faster, so you could get more volume out. Well, it doesn't mean that we don't need people anymore. It just means that we need people to do different things. And so part of that leading and part of how does that go is as you see the climate changing, as you see other tools, other technologies coming, preparing yourself that, okay, well, what I was doing or the way I was doing it, I won't need to do that anymore. I'll need to change it. We still need people. We still need to change around. And so if you're going to let life happen to you, or if you're going to participate, that really changes the difference there. And if you're just one of the people who just wants to kind of sit on the inner tube and let the current take you where you may, okay, that's not really, you can't really lead someone like that. They're just wanting to float and drift, and that's okay. But if people want to take control, want to be more active in where they're heading, that's where that leadership comes in. Because even with AI, even with those tools, yes, there's a lot that it can do. And yes, it can put things out, but to use it well And to do it well, that's a completely different thing. I mean, think about like when we talk about, any kind of manufacturing, there's welders and all these other different, skilled labor jobs. Yes, there is some automation that happens in it, but we still use people in most of our factories, most of our stuff, because a human and our ability to quickly make changes or to adapt on the fly, that's something that machines can't do yet. And so knowing how we fit into that bigger economy as it continues on, that's how we continue to stay relevant. And then also just navigate, like as you said, the world has changed a lot. I mean, computers in your home didn't exist whenever I was a child. And I remember whenever they first started making it into the mainstream where people could bring them into their homes. And then, you see over the years just how much more processing and other things. But again, it's just changes. It's things that are there. And you as long as you keep your eyes open on it and hold on tight, it's a much safer place to be.
If you think about back to digitalization and then now this AI era, is there anything that, because I feel like when digitalization started to take over the sort of the work life and the business, it was really like we were so blindfolded and you could only plan maybe 1 year ahead because you had no idea what happens the year after and where the world is then. That surely taught us a lot of things. And personally, I feel so much more comfortable of the AI era because I just try to see it the same way. So if you reminiscence back to the digitalization, is there anything that you can safely take from that experience now that we're coming to this new major transformation, and anything that you did wrong then or misunderstood or anything that you now know how to do differently? What would be your tips?
Sure. I think cautious adopting is probably a good strategy. There's always new technologies that are coming out, and this is the best, the greatest. Everything's going to go here, and you can't always believe the marketing or the other things behind it because that whole script, that whole story is there to convince you that it is going to be. I think that cautious adoption is better because it's different than an outright rejection. Like, I'm just not going to use that. I'm not going to participate in that. And you hear that today with AI conversation where people are like, I just hate it. I'm scared of it. I'm not going to do it. The same kind of thing. I mean, this is the same thing that you still hear stories today of usually people who are much further along in age than either you or I, maybe either you or I combined, that still have like a landline in their home on the wall or something like that, where they didn't adopt new technology because they either felt that they didn't have a place for it. Like, I don't need that. Or I just didn't understand it. And whenever we're confused or scared or we don't understand, it's easier to just fall back to the things that we do. So I think being an early adopter of most technology, I think has been a good thing that's led us well. My father gave that to me. He was always the neatest, latest, greatest of technologies, whether it was computer or audio equipment or television or VCR or any of these things. He was always an early adopter because he wanted to make sure he knew how the technology worked and how he could use it to help himself. But at the same time, being an adopter doesn't mean that you jump in head first all in, because sometimes things change. And so being ready and understanding and just education along the way. So things I've done right, cautious adoption, things I have done wrong, not really learning the depths of some of that technology along the way. You don't have to be an expert in it, but at least have a basic understanding of what it is and what it's doing for you, so that if something doesn't look right or is not working right, you're not trying to force yourself to use the technology, but you're smarter than the other folks who are just, all they know is to push a button or to just wait for the message or the email kind of setup.
I think that's a really good point, because I think that there's like two parallels. The other one is the tools and the technology, learning how to use AI in the best ways in whatever role, responsibility, job you have or situation. And then the other one is to understand the whole concept of AI and this whole AI era and what that brings and how that's going to change businesses, change work, change the entire world step by step. Faster steps than any sort of revolution before, but certainly, as we move along. So I think that there's two sides. And so if it feels kind of overwhelming to take on new tools and technology, at least study and be curious about what does this all mean? And let others test and try and recommend and suggest what works and what doesn't, but understand what this entire era is, because this is so much more than just some app, ChatGPT, Perplexity. Those are just the seeds of it. We're talking about an entire new era, how the world will function. So we jumped into heavy stuff head first, because I like to do that. But I want to talk about you, Bill, a little bit about as well. So can you share about your background? You mentioned your father, and I have to say that it resonates, because my dad is like that as well. When I was a kid, I've always been so into technology, because my dad brought home everything, and I think I was about 8 years old when he told me, like, I don't want to read the manuals anymore, so you read them and then you tell me how they work. And that's the same for our son, who's 17, like, oh, can't be bothered reading them anymore, why don't you figure it out and then tell me what to do with it. Yeah, so tell me about yourself and what led you to focus so strongly on voice and authenticity and meaningful communication in your work. What led you into this kind of life?
Sure. So I guess part of it, I've never really thought about it through that lens. Part of the talking, the authenticity, I've always enjoyed public speaking or being in front of people to present or do that. That's never been a fear or anything that's there. When you take like a speech class, or if you take a class on it, it turns it almost into, it just seems more robotic a lot of times. Where you just follow these steps, follow this kind of this setup. Here's how you introduce this, spend this much time doing this, do these things. And when you do it once or twice, people are like, oh, okay, that's really cool. But then you see it over and over, it just starts to sound stale, or especially if you've got a set program you deliver, those kinds of things. I remember I was an instructor for an Old Testament Bible class, and we did the same class, just at many different locations. I was part of a national group. And I remember one of the pastors one time asking one of the other instructors, how many times have you done this? And the guy's like, oh man, I've lost count. I've done it so many times. He goes, would you do me a favor and just today pretend like it's the first time? Really think about it. Really keep your thoughts into there. And I remember hearing that, and I was like, wow, that's a deep thing, because when you really look to try to make that authenticity, you really turn it into a conversation rather than just a knowledge exchange. Because we could have the same conversation. I could tell you what you need to know. I can give you knowledge, information, whether it's personal, spiritual, business, whatever. I can just dump knowledge on you.
Yeah.
I could write an outline and give you some notes, but turning it into a conversation, actually looking for those points of connection, that's where something feels different and feels more authentic. And I think that's really the piece that's in there. And that's, as we continue you were talking about AI, I mean, that authenticity of conversation, it's getting harder and harder to tell. I mean, it is getting smarter and it's getting better. And some of it's pattern based, but at the same time, just really being able to connect to someone or ask a question, that's where that comes in. I do more data stuff on marketing. I'm not a creative person. I don't do visual creativity kind of stuff. I like to cook, but everybody always makes fun of the way my food looks. It does not look the prettiest on a plate, but it tastes fantastic, because I'm more about how it actually tastes and acts and works than what it looks like. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the same thing in the way whenever I do creative stuff. So that's why our team does that. I'm an architect and we talk through together, but I'm not the actual visual person. And so I think that connection just has always come through, because I enjoy connecting with people and having authentic conversations more than just taking a bullhorn out and just screaming your message out across the landscape and then hoping someone hears and responds. And I think when you do that, you create something.
When you were describing like the authenticity versus getting the template or the sort of the robotic response versus having conversations, I think that's what we need to understand about AI at the moment, especially the generative AI that we could use for creating content. So I think that's the same. Of course, you can teach the AI to be more authentic and how to give it a human voice and how to be sound more like you. But I would assume that at this point, majority of those who use AI for creating content doesn't know how to prompt properly or teach the AI. You nailed it in a way that you can use it as a tool to help you to use your time more effectively in terms of like ideation and giving you like the sort of the outlines and even like meet within the outlines, but then you have to enhance it, make it human and feel like a conversation instead of just a bullhorn one-way message.
And if you don't take the time to do that, that's going to be one of those separators that we'll see as the technology continues to be more adopted. You'll be able to quickly see the folks who know how to use the tool well and who just push the button.
Yes, and there's nothing wrong about using technology to help you make you more efficient and save time, and nothing wrong, but obviously the importance is that you learn how to make the most of it so that it actually helps you and doesn't drown you because others can see that it's not authentic. So let's talk about why B2B marketing feels boring. I like to challenge B2B marketing because I think that it's very boring. It is kind of like, this is the way we've always communicated and promoted businesses, so that must be really good, even though no one cares.
Right.
And oftentimes, because we work a lot on social media, and oftentimes I ask people like who are in control of the business social media that why do you post something like this? If this was another company, is this the kind of content that, would you read it? Would you watch this video? Would you look at this? So why do you do it? Just because it has always been done doesn't mean that it's the way that works anymore. So from your experience, why does B2B marketing end up sounding so boring and so stale and so just...
I think part of that's a leadership and where it's driven, especially in B2B. When you think of B2B a lot, people view their company or their product as more of a commodity. Like, you have to have this. You need this. You need to have tires for your car. You need to have this gas to run this. You need to have this piece of metal to do this particular thing. So I think a lot of times the company just starts to look at themselves as a commodity or just a thing that you have to have. Well, if you do that, it doesn't sound that engaging to begin with. Now I've already kind of shot myself because I've already set my expectation that this is something that's not exciting and it's just a necessity. And then that just continues to go down. And then you get the idea that starts to foment inside of that is it doesn't really matter how good our stuff is or what this is. You're going to need to buy this thing. And so I just need to make you aware that we sell it so that you can come to us and buy it. But there's never any of that connection. There's never any of that authenticity. And so it's just like when people ask, hey, I need a trifold brochure. The brochure is where you get the threefold brochure. I'm like, okay, why do you need that? Well, because that's what people are going to read about. I said, and I asked the same question as you do with social media. Like, when's the last time you read one of those? Well, I don't read them. There's too much stuff on them and they're boring. Well, then why are you making them? And why are you handing them to people to throw away? Just give them a blank piece of paper. It costs a lot less money and just have them throw that away. And at least you can recycle it easier. So I think people fall into the trap of that as generations have changed. I don't think everyone's paid attention to that because it's also your audience. It's who's receiving on the other end, that purchasing agent inside the company, whoever's going to buy from you. That person has probably changed. At some point, they're going to retire or get promoted, and there's going to be someone new in that position. And so now you need to make sure that it connects with them. And if they're from a different generation or they have a different worldview or a different way of communicating, that's going to be completely different. I mean, that's why we don't send faxes anymore. We used to have fax machines. We used to market through fax machines and send faxes. Yeah. Or you'd have to do we don't do that anymore. I mean, there's still a couple of places where that happens, but the technology changed along the way. And I think a lot of times it feels so boring is just because people view manufacturing or B2B as just a big thing that has to keep running, but we don't really need to keep it. We don't need to keep it nice and pretty or authentic or fresh, but they forget that the whole market and the landscape around them has changed. And so when you see that and you tie in, leadership and just the way we've always done things, or you tie in, well, I don't like those things. I don't like videos, so we don't use videos. Well, you start to see that leadership decision start kind of infiltrating and filtering through all these different pieces. And I think that's part of the reason that a lot of times it just feels old and stale is because that's just what they've done. Because newer marketing, you don't feel that way, especially newer products that are in the B2B space. Now, they're a small voice in a very large crowd, but those things are a different kind of connection. And that's why you'll be like, wow, that's a new or unique or different way of approaching that.
Do you find that smaller companies like startups, scale-ups have more exciting marketing than larger entities, traditional businesses, companies that have been there for ages?
I don't know if I could say across the board. I think they're definitely more experimental, I guess is a good word, where they'll try different things and do different things. I think that the same time though, that happens in there, the marketing they put together is marketing that they like. And you have to make sure it's going to land with your audience. That's the other thing that's too. So yeah, I'd see that they're willing to take some more risk and be more experimental in that. It's just a matter of making sure that there's some wisdom on how is this actually going to interact and land to come into there.
When I comment about the when you said that business B2B marketing is made in a way that their products or services are necessities and they become a commodity, that is really, really dangerous strategy, because if we think about if there's something that is so necessary that we must have it, obviously it's the necessity driving the emotional reason why to get it, which means that you are going to go for the cheapest option. So if we
it turns you into a commodity. You are what you said that you were going to be.
And there's so much more competition, and it's more difficult to sustain customers because they're always going to go for the cheapest option on the market. So of course marketing is so much more than just promotions, but when we talk about branding, the role of branding is to take a commodity product and take it away from being seen and felt as a commodity and creating stardust around it so that it feels special and people want to have it. But I think it's really super dangerous to choose a marketing strategy where your product or service is a commodity, so that your message is that you must have this.
Right. Yeah. Well, so or the message is that we're just the cheapest, right? Yeah. That's what that turns it into. We're the most cost effective. And like you said, as soon as somebody else shows up that's more cost effective, you're out and somebody else is in. Because there's no connection. There's no reason.
Yeah. Exactly. So what do you see organizations doing unintentionally that strips humanity out of their communication?
I think that a lot of times it's just a checkbox that they do, like, oh, we have to make sure that we post on social, or that we do a YouTube video, or we write a blog, or we do a press release. And we have to do this activity rather than what are we going to communicate. So they focus more on finishing the activity than actually thinking about the depth of it. And that's where you can use tools like an AI, or you just recycle something old that was in there and you put it out. And so I think it's treated more just like a task on a list rather than something of thought. It's like, I have to sweep the kitchen. There's not a whole lot of creativity that needs to go into that. It just needs to be done, right? And that's different than I need to communicate to my customer base or new customers about my product and why they want to buy from us. But I think it's treated with about the same amount of effort and thought as just like, I have to get this done. And so knock it out. And so I think a lot of that is a big problem that comes in, because if that mentality that you start with is going to show up in the communication at some point. And so if you're not really thinking like, wow, I really need to make a connection, or I need to make sure that people understand what we have, it just gets lost. And then it just turns into just a laundry list and a couple of bullet points.
Yeah. I'm laughing because we actually had this conversation yesterday with my husband and our son. So our son, he was supposed to sweep the kitchen floor. And yes, he did it, but my husband said that, well, that's kind of a C-class, outcome or quality level, that you're not getting paid that much for the kind of service, the kind of kitchen sweeping. And I'm always telling my husband the same thing. And he's like, well, I'm only promising to give you like a B class. And I'm like, I want the A class. For my son, it's more like just a task. I need to do this so that I can get a little bit extra money from my parents. And then for me, I'm looking for the A class, which makes me feel good because the house is clean and smells nice. So I think that's a little bit about the same thing, isn't it?
Yes. Well, and it's again like, hey, I did what you asked me to, right? I swept the floor. I hit the mark. You're like,
Yeah.
but I wanted you to do it with excellence. I wanted to see
Yeah.
something more in there. So
Exactly.
I think that's
Exactly.
that heart, that again,
Yeah.
back to where's your heart in your message that
Yeah.
comes in, or
Yeah.
your activity.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So let's talk about the authentic voice, which obviously we've touched on multiple times already. But why do you think that finding a real brand voice is so difficult for so many businesses?
First one is they just don't think it's important. It just either sounds like a waste of time and money, or it just sounds unnecessary because it's clear. The facts are the facts. Here's what we
Mhm.
have. We do this. Here's the thing we
Yeah.
make. We do this. Here's the thing we supply. We do this. And so I think from that standpoint that it's left out. And I think the other part is that someone just doesn't know. And
Mm.
it's in that place of not understanding or just not having that knowledge. It's brave to ask, like, hey, I don't know what this is or what comes on. And so to be able to ask for that, because the danger is on the other side, as people, as customers, there's something about it that just doesn't set right when it's inauthentic. And you may not be able to put your finger on it and say, oh, it's that thing right
Mhm.
there, that they're not telling the truth, or that's
Mhm.
obviously a fake wig, or that's like those kinds of things. It's just something that just doesn't feel right, because it
Yeah.
feels either forced or rehearsed, and it's
Yeah.
not who you are.
Yeah.
And so I think just not thinking that it's important, not knowing how to do it, and then just not understanding the results or the penalty that you
Yeah.
pay by not doing it. I think those things
Yeah.
all kind of work together.
Yeah. Finland is very much known as an engineering country, and
Hmm.
whereas Sweden, our neighbor, is known as those who can commercialize and market anything and sell anything. We've worked with so many tech companies and lots of engineers over my time as a business owner, and they kind of think that, well, if the product is good, if all the nicks and knacks are like in order and it's like prime technology, then it should sell itself.
Hmm.
How about your customers? Have you experienced that kind of thing? What do you tell to a customer who feels like there's no need for an authentic, real brand voice or marketing?
Yeah, those come out. The other thing that'll happen is that I'll have to tell people maybe your technology or your solution is newer, and so people just don't know to ask for it. So if you don't know to ask for it or to look for it, it'll just sit in the dark or in the shadows because you won't know to go look for it. So that's one conversation that we can have. You can't argue someone into doing it, but you just bring out some of the same points that we've discussed of how are you going to differentiate yourself? Or if you're at an exposition of businesses and there's 10 different businesses that all do the same thing, how are you going to look different and stand out in a memorable way that actually is meaningful to your product or to your service? And so when you start to talk through that, yes, engineers, they have a different mindset, right?
Hmm.
They're very analytical, and
Yeah.
when you're doing an engineering problem, there's not a marketing team that's saying use my equation or use my approach, right? It's there's nobody doing that. It's what is the thing that works. And so I think that same mentality kind of comes through, but just remembering and reminding that the person on the other end of your communication may not be you. It could be someone with a different role or responsibility or skill set. And so how do you soften that up? How do you put that out in front? So there's some conversation that's in there, but at the end of the day, it's really going to have to be to someone to say, okay, that makes sense. Or they'll say, no, that's fine. We're just going to stick with what we have. And then you go,
Yeah.
okay, I hope it works well for you. Good
Yeah,
luck.
yeah. You mentioned before about the leadership clarity. How do you think that leadership clarity or lack of shows up in messaging and marketing?
I think, again, as we had talked about just some of the messaging, why it's boring, I think it's the mentality of leadership filters down
Right.
through all of that. If
Yeah.
they look at it as just a necessary evil, then they'll
Mhm.
put the bare minimum of work into it that comes in. Or the other thing is if you have a team that's working and trying to do stuff, but they know that leadership is just going to show up at some point and just say, yes, no, here, do it like this and throw away,
Yeah.
then you stifle creativity, because why would you put that much effort into something that you're assuming is just going to get thrown away or torn down and just with someone else is going to show up and put their own paint on it? So that's the other kind of trap you can fall into. You don't have to let things go out the door that you don't believe in or that are inauthentic. But if
Yeah.
you don't encourage people and take it seriously as far as that communication, I think you'll really start to see it. And then it just turns into just very bland or plain marketing, or it's just got so much over the top to try to like sparkles or raz to try to get somebody to take a look at it. But there's nothing memorable about it other than, oh, did you see that that marketing piece that had that big green giant on it? Yeah, what was it for? I don't know, but that giant was cool. Like, you don't remember the product, you don't remember anything about it. You
Yeah.
remember the little hook piece, but you don't remember the rest of
Yeah.
it. So again, it's the hunt for authenticity versus just
Yeah.
viral or a check in the box.
Yeah. Have you been in situations when you've had that authentic discussion, conversation with the client, gathering the background information to propose them with a marketing message or a strategy or something, and then there's a lot of cues in that conversation which you feel like, oh, this is excellent, we know how to differentiate this company from their competitors. Then you give them the draft for comments, and then they kind of take the red marker and cross out everything that was exciting and different, and it came from their own mouths. But when they
Right.
see it written, and then the end result is something so boring and bland that it just lost everything. Have you experienced that with your clients in your
I
career?
have seen that. And sometimes it's valid. Sometimes
Mhm.
we've missed the mark, that we've made the mistake of thinking like us rather than the client
Right.
or their audience. So sometimes it's
Which is
valid.
important.
Yeah. Oh, back to that. Is it real or is it just a script? But
Yeah.
on the other side, I think fear is the biggest thing that we have to work
Mhm.
against. If someone feels that they don't understand, or if they're from a leadership standpoint, they're scared that there's something that's doing that they didn't start the process with or steer that makes them look like they're not a good leader. And
Mhm.
so that fear plays in there as well. So walking through that carefully is good. But we have a saying in our agency, we call it pink polka dots, that at the end of the day, we can tell you that it's not going to look right, or we shouldn't do it this
Mhm.
way, but they're our client, and we've done our job by
Yeah,
voicing our concern, but they want pink polka dots on it. We're going to put pink polka dots on it.
that's right. What do you think that leaders misunderstand about it's not about the volume, it's the message in practice?
I think that's an old way of marketing that we used to do. Was the
Mm.
more times I could get my brand in front of somebody, or the
Yeah.
louder I could do it. That's why Super Bowl commercials in America were so big,
Yeah.
because that's one of the most expensive TV times that you
Yeah.
can buy. And so
But
if we
they're
get
still
our ad on,
big. Yeah.
yes. Well, it's as big as the game. I mean, there's
Yeah.
always talk about, did you see the commercials? And there's a recap
Yeah.
of the commercials, just like a recap of the game. And so there's some prestige of being in
Mm.
that particular space, as well as just the audience, the ideas that are in there. And so sometimes if you have a good message, it works. And then when it doesn't, you'll see those replies as well, where people are like, wow, this is awful, or I can't believe you spent money on this. And so that volume was an old tactic. But with the way that we do marketing today, and with digital tools, as well as just more information, more knowledge, we can be more specific. We can make sure that we're only marketing to our prime customers, or where our prime customers would be. And so it's not about voice anymore, or your volume. It's
Mm.
about your message and that authenticity to be something of interest that is going to be interesting to that customer.
Yeah.
And so having those conversations of looking, it doesn't necessarily mean that the marketing is going to just turn everything and spin quickly and grow. But it's, again, the effectiveness of that message, and the measurements that we show and the data that we show will
Mm.
show those difference of effectiveness. And it's a different way of getting to that point. But sometimes it is more expensive to do it that way. But the end
Yeah.
result is you get a much better return on your investment
Mhm.
to go in. So it's just, those are, again, it's just it's a learning process. It's changing the way
Yeah.
that people think. Or if you talk about ads, they're like, those ads that go before I watch my YouTube video, I just put my phone down, I walk away, I don't even watch those things. I don't do that. I'm like, well, you're right. A lot of people do. But if we're using technology correctly and identifying your right audience, and in that first 2 seconds, we can do something to be able to capture their attention to where they know this message is for me, they're going to watch it. The reason you put your phone down on those other ones is they're not targeted to you. You're not the
Yeah.
audience. And so let's
Yeah.
not repeat that.
Yeah.
So just
So
showing
relevance
people and
is,
trying to talk through.
yeah. So relevance
Yes.
matters a lot in the whatever content, whether it's ad content or organic content, but understanding
Mhm.
your target audience, what are their problems, what are their desires, aspirations, and then making sure that your message is matching those. Is there a time when silence is better than noise in marketing?
Yeah, I think it's just like with any good conversation, right?
Mm.
If you're having a good conversation, you're really connecting with someone,
Yeah,
sometimes just being quiet is good. It gives time for reflection, and
yeah,
it also gives time for someone to make a choice or a decision. We have to think a little bit, and so give people a
yeah,
chance to pause, give people a break. It's you were talking about LinkedIn and reading through my LinkedIn profile. So I don't know if you're a lot like me. I'll get tons of connections every day from people who are like, "Oh, Bill, I want to connect. I want to connect." And you can tell some of them are people that really want to connect and learn from you. Some of them may be
hmm,
colleagues or prospects or friends. And you can tell some of them are going to be salespeople because they've put it in their title or whatever they are.
yeah,
And you'll accept a connection. And bad LinkedIn marketing, someone will, within like 10 seconds of accepting, it seems, I'll get this LinkedIn message that's just this massive copy and paste of, "Thank you so much, Bill, for connecting. I'm selling you this thing, and here's how to sign up for a free demo, and do this, and do this, and blah, 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 blah." Oh, there's no
I
connection
feel
here.
you.
There's none of that
I
authenticity.
feel you.
There's
Yeah,
nothing that's there.
yeah,
But somebody somewhere sees that and goes, "Oh, that's good. How much does that cost?" "Well, it's just a few pennies because it's really not effective. Let's do that. It's
yeah,
cheaper, and then we'll just keep throwing more and more and more." Well,
yeah,
kind of the happy medium is, don't necessarily send that message, within 30 seconds of making the connection. You could just say, "Thanks, Susanna, for connecting. I appreciate sharing good ideas in the future," and just giving it some space to where it feels like, "Oh, okay, you're really making an effort to connect instead of
hmm,
just rapid fire, just trying to throw things as many
yeah,
times as fast as I can." "Are you ready to make that decision? Did you make that decision? Are you ready to go on that? Are you doing this?" I mean, you talked about you and your husband and your son. I,
yeah,
I know when I was dating my wife, if I had just kept calling her and over and over and over until she accepted a date, and then like, "When are we going out again? Are we going? Are you going?" And just going over, and we wouldn't be married because she would say, "Wow, you got to give me some space. This feels like you're
yeah,
smothering me."
yeah, yeah,
Same idea in business. You just
yeah.
got to give people some time to think and some time for that connection to really grow that's in there.
That's a really good point. And I think that in this world of content marketing, because anyone can obviously post as much as they want to, and now with AI, they can, multiply that.
Hmm.
I think that I think instead of pushing and pushing in terms of content, also comments on people's posts are content. And if you are a
Hmm.
salesperson or you want to network and build your audience, you don't have to create new content all the time, or you don't have to keep a message emailing on LinkedIn someone until they block you, because you can also build that trust by being interested in what they've been posting about,
Hmm.
why is that important to them, and having those conversations. Sometimes I feel like that because the content marketing era on social media especially has been with us for not quite 20 years, but 15 years at least, that it has
Hmm.
become such a standard way of working on social media that people forget about the other ways of, like, you want to be out there for your audiences because you want them to be aware of you so that you can build trust. Pushing more and more is not necessarily good for trust building, but being interested and showing that. I like to say that a lot of companies are doing me marketing. It's all about us. It's all about me. It's all about my needs, my requests, my desires, my deadlines, my schedules, my meeting goals, whatever. So I think when we talk about silence instead of noise, sometimes you can achieve so much more and quicker if you show some interest and focus on, like, how am I gonna make this person trust me, and sort of open the conversation from there on. And that's also marketing and
If you want to,
communication.
it is. If you want a fun little watch, you can go to YouTube and look up Mr. Rogers 1 minute. So Mr.
Okay.
Rogers was a television hosted a children's television show here in America. It was quite popular show, but one of the things that he did was that he took a timer, just as he was talking about just minutes and just about being peaceful and different things.
Yeah.
And this is a kid's show, right? And
Okay.
so he said, "Let's just figure out what a minute is." And so he took a timer, and it was one of the old manual timers with the dial, and he actually turned it
Yeah.
to 1 minute. and just sets it on the table and just sits there silently and watches the timer count down for a minute. Now, this is not a digital counter, so it's not going down. You hear that click, 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 and the needle steadily moving, and then ding, it goes off. He goes, see, that's a minute. And he was quiet for the entire 60 seconds. He was quiet. He didn't go in. Now, if you take that to other children's programs who were out at the time, these are cartoons and other things, lots of flashing lights and things moving and everywhere. And it's just energy, 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 energy. There was never any time of rest or anything in there. And so I think even at that early stage, when you see that, it's just such a differentiation. Now, there's a difference between just being quiet because you're lazy or you have nothing to say, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about thoughtful pause that's in there. And I think that's a big difference, and knowing when to do that and how to do it well.
So from your perspective, talking about trust, how does consistent human communication build trust over time? And what's your perspective on why it's so important?
I think it shows that you can be trusted. That when you're consistently saying the same messaging or similar sounding messaging that's in there, and then living it out to where other people see it in your personal or your professional life, whether that's in your social posting or news that other people have, because the best things are the parts that you don't create, right? It's where you're covered by somebody else. And so you don't get to drive the script or the narrative that's in there. And I think all of that is together helps build a trust of, I may not always agree or understand, but I at least believe and understand and agree with you. And so I'm going to take that you're leading me in the right place.
Right.
And so it's that continued effort is important. And as we talk about, making connections, different things, there are all kinds of automation tools out there to help with salespeople or lead nurturing or those kinds of things. But again, if you don't take the time and set them up well to bring real authenticity, even though it's an automation that's doing it, you can still be authentic in the messaging and the cadence and how that's happening. Yeah. But that's a person that needs to do that. And then knowing when to say, okay, it's time for the computer to stop and for me to jump back in. So that consistent authenticity is why it's so important.
Is there anything in marketing or creating those messages, communicating, that if we think about the regular, the boring type of B2B marketing, that we should do differently to build trust?
I think you have to be careful, because I think you can take it down too much as well. If I work on big electric motors in your manufacturing company, I may need to just give you a list of all of the companies I can work with, which brands or which parts am I certified to work on. That doesn't need to be that creative, right? That's just something I just need to go, can you do this? Yes or no, or I need to find somebody else. I think you can do that. If you try to make everything creative and just new and unique and fun, I think you end up with nothing looking different. And so you're in the same mess of everything that's in there. So, but when you talk about, ways of making that connection, whatever it is, just looking for new ways of building good trust that's in there, whether that's a specific marketing that's in there, or if it's a prospect, to be able to make it more personal because you take some time to do a little bit of research about them, about what is that good opener that's in there. Nothing too creepy or stalking or anything like that, but just looking for those common interests, those things that are in there. I think those are where you can start to see that differentiation. Or just say it right off the bat. There are 12 other companies that do the exact same thing that I do, but here's why we're different and why you would want to work with us. In my market, I'm not the only marketing and advertising agency that's here in our market. There are a lot. And when I say a lot, I really mean a lot. There's a lot of them. Size and scale, those are quick things that you can't work with this project because you're either going to be too expensive or you don't have the staff to do it. Okay, well then, so I can quickly mark through, but then I'm still going to end up with a group of people vendors who could do this. So how do I differentiate with it? And again, with something to remember, because you want to make sure that whatever that is, it ties back in a way that's going to be memorable, and that you're okay with people remembering that about your company. And so that way you don't put things on there or put something out just for shock.
At the point where someone already has that list in their hands that we need help, we need a partner, we need a marketing partner, whoever on that list is already on the top of their mind, because they've seen them before, because they've learned from that side, because they know people who are there, because they, for a reason or another, they place trust in that name. is going to be the one that they choose. When we think about marketing and the communication and why doing things in a boring way in business marketing does not help you, why being silent is better than doing the boring stuff, is that when your customer has that list, are you going to be on that list at all? Or are you going to be the company on that list that they immediately notice, like, I know about them, I followed them, I trust them, they're exciting, they're relevant, they're interesting, I feel like they understand my problem. So I think that that's how marketing communication has changed, because we have so much access to information these days, and it's more and more difficult to be memorable, really stick, be remembered. So then if you do marketing in a way that you just have to do, it's like a task, you tick the box, that's waste of money and time. I don't think it's going to lead into anything.
No, and I think you brought up a good point too, that again, because of the way our world works, not all marketing is an immediate decision either.
Yeah.
I made it just because I've heard about your company or your service doesn't mean I need to use it right away.
Right.
And I may just read stuff that you're putting out or enjoy your content. Yeah. Like you said, whenever that need comes to the top, then I'll remember you for that.
Yeah.
And so that's a hard thing. And that's a hard thing for business owners. It's a hard thing for other people. How is this being effective, and is what I'm doing effective? And that's where you've got to have the data. You have to look and see how are things interacting, and it doesn't always immediately turn into a phone call or someone coming to your website doing a form fill or those kind of things. It may take a while on that sales cycle, but you can look at the analytics, you can look at the data to see if I'm putting out, is it really resonating with people, and how are they going in? Just like your podcast. You get all this great data of how many downloads are you having? Where's it coming from? Are they actually listening? How much are they listening to? What's their average time it takes them to listen to one of your podcasts? Those kinds of things. If no one is downloading your podcast and you still keep making them, then basically you're just talking to yourself. Exactly. And that may be fun and you may be okay with that, but if you're using it as a marketing tool, then you better figure out something new that's in there.
Exactly. You being a data guy, in your experience, how interested are companies about the marketing data?
At first, they'll tell you that it's too much and I don't really care and that's what it's for. I think the real interest starts to come in whenever I start showing people where things aren't working, because they're not used to someone saying, well, here's something that we're doing that isn't working well. That doesn't mean that we did a bad job. It just means that something didn't line up right. Our message isn't resonating with your audience, or it's not delivering well, and it's not going in. And so looking at the data of what do we change, or sometimes we're like, hey, this just isn't working. Stop doing this. Let's do something else, because we want to make sure that we're effective. That's usually when people start to pay attention to the data, because once it's telling, if it's telling you good stuff, that's okay. When it tells you not so good stuff is when people really pay attention, because if you handle that well and can talk it through, that's again, one of those differentiators between you and everyone else. And then also showing them, hey, that sometimes these things take time. So, because the data doesn't have any feelings, it's just numbers, it's data. And so being able to show that in an easy to understand method, and showing customers or other people how they can do that on their own, so that there's no question of the truthfulness of what you're doing. That's a really good point to where people are like, oh, I think I'm going to start paying more attention to this.
So as we are coming to an end of this episode, I want to jump back a little bit to the AI thing still. We've discussed how AI is, obviously, we all know that it's making the content creation faster and easier. Is there a risk? What would be the biggest risk?
You could change the way that people hear your business that you don't agree with, because the AI, like you were saying, if you don't prompt it, if you don't train it, if you don't put those things in, I think that you're going to change. You're going to get a voice, but it's going to be your AI agent's voice and not necessarily yours if you haven't put the training in. And then just from a technology standpoint, depending on what tool you're using, if you haven't put appropriate safeguards out there, then all of your company's data is now part of the AI's intelligence model. And though it may not show up directly, Susanna said this, like it's not going to prompt that straight back out, but all of the information that you fed into it, even if it's proprietary or private information about your company, is now something that the AI understands and has inside of its large model. So from a technology, safety, security standpoint, you need to make sure that you understand how to properly safeguard the tool. And then just from the marketing and your brand voice, your company's brand is now going to be that AI agent instead of you. And so I think those are some big risks, because AI is going to try to find the common place where a lot of other people are marketing or doing. And so you'll be different than a lot, but you're going to definitely see some similarities that are starting to show up. And that's going to cause that part of where somebody who's your audience is going to think, I've seen this before, or this sounds a lot like, I'm not sure if I can believe this. And I don't know why, but it just doesn't feel right. And so I think those are all big risks that come if you don't really understand the tool or the tech.
Now, if a business leader listening to this episode feels like their communication isn't landing, what would you suggest be the first question that they should ask themselves?
I know you didn't do it on purpose, but that's a great lead-in. I have there's a website that we put together. It's called 599haircut.com, haircut.com, and it's about a story of me. It was also my wife, after she read my story, she said, that was a commercial. I said, it may have been a commercial, but it really happened to me, and I didn't know about the commercial when I wrote this. But the quick story is I was going to a haircut, a national chain here in America, to get a haircut. They were running a special for $5.99 haircuts, as they so often do. I pull in, the wait time is too long. It's an hour and a half because it's a cheap haircut and there's a lot of people waiting. I need a haircut. I don't have an hour and a half to wait. So I drive to a local barber shop, and on the wall, it's very clearly stated it's $15 for a haircut. I sit down and I'm talking with the guy as he's cutting my hair. And I said, hey, I want to ask you a question. I'm not negotiating my haircut pricing. He said, that's good because it's on the wall. I'm like, yes, I understand. I'm paying the $15. But I just came from this other place that said they were going to give me a haircut for $5.99. So what's the difference between your $15 haircut and the $5.99 haircut? Because we've got a haircut and a price, right? Those are only two things. Mm-hmm. And the guy smiled and he just kind of looked at me and he goes, oh, that's simple. I fix $5.99 haircuts. So if you've ever had a bad haircut, you know exactly what that feels like. You know what that is. And so the cheap becomes expensive when you do that. And so understanding your marketing, your message, if you go to that $5.99 haircut website, there's a free download. And when I say free, it totally is. You don't have to give me your email. You don't have to do anything. There's just a button. Click and download it. There's some quick pointers to go through on that messaging and that voice. How do you ask yourself that authentic question? If you want to dive a little bit deeper, I do ask for an email there if you go into that. But both of those, my thank you back to anybody who downloads those. There's a link in the back of those PDFs to get on my calendar to talk for 15, 30 minutes about your branding, about your marketing, and anything that I can do is helpfulness. All of it's free. It's not like we're charging or doing anything for that. But I think it's just having a good guide to take you through, especially if it's not something you're used to doing. And just showing, and then a lot of times the same smile that you have is what starts to happen with people, because they're like, what I'm saying is important and it's there. I just no one ever showed me how to say it or how to pull that out. Or you remember those things that made you excited when you first started that company or first started working there. And so to bring those out. So I think it just takes a little bit of time and some practice to get in there.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Bill. This has been a delightful conversation and time with you. If our listeners want to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, I told you about the $5.99 haircut. That's just got some basic information. If you want to learn more about our company, we're Element502, ELE. Check out some of the projects that we've worked out, look around and see our method and approach to marketing. And there's some contact pages, some other things on there if you want to reach out. But I encourage people just kind of snoop around and look, just like we've been talking about. Our voice and our message are authentic. They're out there to be found. They're not the biggest bullhorn because we don't believe in that kind of stuff. But we do good work at a fair price for people, and we like to guide along the way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And as we wrap up today's conversation, I want to leave you all with this thought. Whether we're talking about leadership, communication, culture, or AI, the common thread is always the same: how we make sense of complexity as humans. None of this is about having all the answers. It's about asking better questions, noticing what's really happening around us and in our organizations, and leading with more clarity and intention, especially when things feel fast or uncertain. So thank you for spending time with my guest Bill today, and me, of course, and for listening with an open mind. I'll be back next week again with a new episode on the Story Driven Business podcast, where we will continue exploring how leadership, culture, and communication shape success in the AI era. Until then, take care and lead thoughtfully. Bye-bye.